In this video, we will cover basic agility platform architecture and preparing for an agility platform install. Agility platform runs on an agility appliance. The version of agility platform, the version of the agility base, and the version of the appliance must all be compatible. You can validate this in your agility platform release notes for the version that you're installing. The appliances are either downloaded from the agility file site, FTP site, or you need to get access to them for example, in the case of Amazon, you need to get access to the AMIs, so you would need to have an account number and a region where we would need to make those appliances available. These are typically updated with major agility platform releases, so you wouldn't have to change the base and the appliance that often, but it is always wise to check that when you go to do an install. Agility platform uses MySQL for its database, and it stores all of the configuration and property data. It's installed as part of the agility base install and configured ultimately with the agility platform install. Agility platform will not run without the database, and it should also be backed up regularly. Currently, no other databases such as Oracle or MySQL are supported. So right now we're still using MySQL. Important considerations. If Agility Platform goes down, it will not shut down the managed instances. No changes can be made, but it will not impact the running environment. In the event of a major failure, Agility can be restored from a copy of the database. So again, it is important to back up that database regularly. Here is some key information with regards to the Agility appliance. First of all, Agility is installed on the appliance. The appliance is a modified version of Red Hat. It's based on that. But it's been significantly modified and optimized for Agility platform. No, Agility platform cannot be installed on a standard Red Hat operating system without considerable configuration, and it's thereby not supported. There are Agility appliances for most environments, for example, appliance AMIs for Amazon, which you have to get access to, appliance OVAs for vSphere, so you would need to download those from the FTP site, or appliance VHD files that you'd use for Hyper-V or Azure environments. Agility platform installs are independent of the cloud provider types. While it is usually more convenient to have Agility platform installed in a managed environment, this is not a requirement. The environments that Agility manages can be completely different from the ones that it's actually installed on. When installing Agility platform, a basic knowledge of Linux is required and at least very helpful. You need to be able to run the RPMs. You need to be able to work with files, copy them, move them to the appliance. You need to know how to stop and start processes. And it's also good to be able to edit files using VI. Here are a few of the components of the Agility primary server. First component is MySQL, which is used to store all of the configuration and property data for Agility platform. Zookeeper is used to coordinate and configure the distributed roles. We will handle that in a different class called Distributed Architecture. RabbitMQ is used for message queuing, also working through the distributed roles and processes within Agility platform. Obviously, the Agility platform software itself. CollectD, which is used for monitoring Agility platform, and that's how the metrics are gathered. And then the last element is the Yum repo, which holds the attachments and the artifacts for the Agility platform scripts. It also distributes those components out to repositories. Agility platform repositories are key to managing Agility. They are typically used to store the scripts and attachments and obviously the artifacts that Agility platform uses. There are several repository types, and these are to support the various cloud providers that Agility supports. Depending on the type of cloud provider, it helps dictate the type of repository. So you will see when you go to configure a repository, there are several options. For instance, in Amazon, when you create the cloud provider, it automatically creates an S3 repository. In vSphere, you will typically do that with an NFS configuration. Again, this is really dependent on your cloud provider type. Repositories do not store typically all of the objects within Agility Platform, but only the objects that pertain to their location in the policy tree. So if you have a cloud provider that is configured within a certain part of the tree, for instance, you have one that's for HIPAA objects, then that particular repository will only have the HIPAA data. It will not have the information from the other parts of the tree, and vice versa is true. If you have a corporate operations, it would not have the HIPAA compliant policies and scripts configured. Configuration managers can also be repositories. So if you have System Center Configuration Manager, if you have Chef or Puppet, all of these can be configured as repositories within Agility Platform. Attachments are uploaded to the repositories from the Agility primary server, which is why you need considerable storage on the Agility primary server. And it will distribute it to the repositories throughout the Agility environment. These are typically synchronized either manually, or if not manually, they are synchronized at the top of every hour. It's also good to note that the repositories can be configured for specific physical locations within a given cloud provider. So, for instance, in a vSphere environment, you may have several different locations or different clusters. So you can have a repository that supports each one of those. Likewise, if you're working with Amazon and you have certain VPCs, you can specify ones that are supported by that particular repository. Here we have a simple chart for sizing Agility Platform. The number of instances is a good rule of thumb, but it's also important to consider the number of concurrent users and the level of activity. The amount of change in an environment is likely to impact the performance of Agility more than the actual number of managed instances. It's usually wise to have 4 to 8 cores and 16 gigs of memory for the Agility primary server. All of the other components can scale automatically. So this gives you the most flexibility in terms of managing your environment. This is a relatively simple slide showing the port requirements for Agility communications and helping set up your network configurations. We're not going to go into a lot of details, but it does show the different components and the ports that they communicate on, and you can use this for reference when you're setting up your Agility environments. In this next section, we're going to go through the process steps to prepare for an Agility platform installation. Preparing for an Agility platform install. One of the first elements is to consider the installation location of Agility platform itself. A lot of this should depend on what environments Agility platform is likely to manage. Details matter, so the network logistics and setting up all the connectivity is usually going to be a key determinant here. Location and latency can come into play somewhat, but primarily it's making sure that you have the right network ports open. Agility platform can manage other cloud provider types than the one in which it is installed. This is a common misconception. To install Agility platform, you need to have an account with the appropriate permissions in the environment that you're doing the install. Pretty straightforward there. An Agility platform appliance for that environment. So you would either have downloaded it or you would have gotten access to it. For instance, in the example of an Amazon account, you would have had to get access to an Amazon AMI to do your appliances. As we sort of alluded to before, network configuration is critical. Agility platform has to be accessible by any users that will need to access it. It needs to be able to communicate with the cloud providers, repositories, instances, other collectors. So as you can see, this is a very considerable component of setting up Agility Platform. Sizing is pretty straightforward, but we generally recommend that you go with the higher compute, memory, and storage. While the other elements can scale quite readily using the distributed components, it's still better to try to beef up Agility Platform, obviously, because that minimizes the impact if you needed to add resources later. When preparing for an Agility Platform install, it's very critical to get the license configured up front. And this is why having an idea of what your cloud provider types is very important, not just for networking, but in terms of getting a license, you have to have a pretty good idea of the number of virtual machines you're going to manage, the cloud provider types that you're going to be using, be they vSphere, OpenStack, Azure, Amazon, to make sure that you have the right cloud provider types. The number of concurrent users, and you'll also need the IP address of the appliance that you're going to use for the install. Another key helpful thing to know is that almost nothing can be done in Agility Platform without the license, so it really doesn't make any sense to proceed with the install before you have the license. The next thing, sort of common sense but pretty important, make sure you have your install binaries all set up and configured. You can get those from the FTP site. Agility Platform base, RPM configures the base Agility appliance and the OS configurations. It also installs key components. The Agility Platform zip file, also critical. That's the actual Agility Platform install itself. And the general public license zip file for some of the open source components, particularly CollectD, which is used for reporting. Before you do your install, it's good to have and review all of the product documentation pertaining to your install. We provided a list here. The install guide is very helpful and it gives very specific notes. The admin guide is very useful in terms of working through some of your cloud provider type issues. The user guide in terms of making resources available to your end users. Also key is the release notes. It's really good to review those. You'll get information about the appliance and the base the base configuration or version that supports the version of Agility Platform that you're trying to install. The other thing that you would want to have is the Agility Platform Cloud Adapters Guide for the cloud providers that you're going to be supporting. It goes through the setup and configurations that are specific to, for instance, vSphere, Amazon, etc. Install documents would typically be created by you. An install checklist that covers the preparation and install configurations is good to have on hand. In addition to that, having a run sheet that addresses the install steps in a specific order, together with the configuration settings, that's very useful. Sometimes doing Agility Platform without having these can lead to missteps, so it's an important component. And lastly, a validation plan that clearly establishes the use cases, the final configuration support, and a method for being able to test those would certainly make doing your install considerably easier. Here are a list of things that should be in place before you start your install. When you start your install, you should have already accessed your Agility Platform appliance. You need to make sure that you've downloaded all of the appropriate Agility Platform install files and documentation, have your Agility Platform license, have the SM admin credentials for your appliance, credentials to use for your Agility Platform install. So that's installing within the environment, and also any cloud providers that you're going to connect to. Network configuration, verify your connectivity, and depending on the cloud provider type, you may need to have DNS and DHCP set up and configured. You will want to note the public and private IP addresses of your appliance. You'll need that for some of the install configurations a bit later. You want your run sheet and an install checklist immediately available and should be following those. And you also want to double check the configuration settings as you go along. Double check your work because a mistake can cause a lot of troubleshooting steps if you had to try to fix it and backtrack it all the way back to possibly even redoing the entire install. So very important to consider. So in the last slide, let's talk a little bit about things to be prepared for. Again, make sure that the versions of your Agility appliance, your Agility base package, and your Agility platform are compatible. So review the release notes. Have the appropriate resources on hand, such as support and the administrators of the various resources that are going to be under Agility platform management. So having your storage folks, having your network folks available, along with, if you have your vSphere admin or your Amazon admins, having them readily and available can make your install considerably easier. Consider that Agility platform generally scales through the distributed components. Again, it's usually better to err on the side of caution and go with the higher compute resources for the Agility appliance itself. Network issues in terms of the install tend to be the biggest general issue. Again, so we keep saying that, but make sure that your network has been validated and tested before you move forward with your install. Thank you for viewing this video. You should be able to look for additional training and videos on the Agility platform training site. Also, when you're doing your install, you will need either a terminal server or a PuTTY client. So we provided some links for that. The other link that we have is the Agility platform FTP site. You will need to get credentials, but this gives you access to all of the documentation, appliances, and also the install binaries that you need to install and configure Agility platform. Thank you for viewing our video, and go back to our site and look for more as we move forward. Thank you.